Welcome to Speaking of Strong Style. I am Stephen Conway along with Jeremy Finestone. We are just beginning this brand new show here on the Fight Game Media Network. We're very excited about it, and we're going to be talking all things New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it's a wonderful time of year to start this. The best of the Super Juniors is going. Capital Collision is going. It's a perfect time to begin talking about this wonderful company that we're big fans of and been fans for a long time. So, Jeremy, with that in mind, my name is Stephen Conway. I am a writer for Fight Game Media. I mostly cover WWE, but I am moving off into covering a little bit of New Japan as well, both in written form and now this show here. And I have been a fan of New Japan Pro Wrestling since 1996, Jeremy. Can you believe that? It's been that long since I started watching this stuff. I began tape trading in college, doing the whole thing, sending VHSs around the world with my little local wrestling so that I could see some of these people from Japan, the Masachonos of the world, the Kaiji Mutos, the Jushin Ligers, and been a fan ever since. And I get a chance now to talk about it to all of you and to talk about it with another very knowledgeable man here, Jeremy. And I also write my history site, ringsidereplay.com. That also covers some New Japan history as well. I'm just steeped in it. I'm very fired up about talking about it with you, Jeremy. And tell the folks a little bit about yourself, too.
Steven, I love it. My name is Jeremy Finestone. I have been a contributor to Fight Game Media for a little over 2 years here and there, talking about WWE, AEW, New Japan, whatever the show of the day is, and my passion for pro wrestling just kind of follows along. It's really interesting that we are doing this together, Steven, because whereas you have the history lesson, I really got into New Japan about 2017, 2018. So a lot of my knowledge base is steeped in those years and years after. And I picked it up pretty well. And I tend to understand the way that the company likes to make its pro wrestle. Mm-hmm. And so this matchup that you and I have, that we're going to do this together, I think it's going to bring a lot of interesting perspectives to this show.
I'm definitely excited about it. And it's a company that has a rich history. Of course, famously, it's going through its 50th anniversary this year. And so 1972 is when this began. It's been a company that has had its ups and downs. Of course, weren't sure we were going to have a New Japan Pro Wrestling during some of the aughts. It was really struggling through, went through this big resurgence. That's kind of when you came into it. It was at that peak of that Okada, Tanahashi, Kenny Omega type of resurgence. And of course, the pandemic's had a big impact on it. And for a while, I will admit that New Japan Wrestling was getting a little on the stale side. They couldn't bring people in from overseas. You were starting to see a lot of the same matchups over and over again. A lot of the foreign talent just didn't want to go over there in quarantine. We're starting to move away from that now. We still don't have cheering in with the crowd, and we'll get into all that. But we're starting to see some names and new faces come in. We have this whole Forbidden Door thing coming with AEW. I think we're at the precipice of a very exciting time again after a couple of years where it was a little shaky. Gato is the booker, of course, for New Japan Pro Wrestling and one of the main performers and managers on the shows. And he has had to really work very hard to try to keep things fresh. And it's been a struggle. I think he's getting a little bit of relief now, as we see in this Super Juniors tournament. And in Capital Collision, some new names and faces. I think we just have a lot of really interesting stuff we're going to be talking about over the next few months and years to come.
I have to say, it feels like the future is brighter than it's been in a while. And it's hard to quantify how off New Japan has felt when you were in the thick of it. I think I was commenting to you a couple days ago, watching the Super Juniors felt like a defibrillator on pro wrestling in New Japan. Like, it was just such a shock to the system. And I don't want to knock Capital Collision at all. We're going to recap that next. But watching the Super Juniors after Capital Collision, I don't think I would have been as receptive to Capital Collision had I watched it after the first night of Super Juniors.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. Well, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on Capital Collision and Super Juniors. And of course, that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the big show in DC. And it began with most of the New Japan Strong guys. And of course, New Japan Strong, NJPW Strong, is the show that they have on Saturday nights, based in the United States. And it airs on NJPW World, their streaming service. on Saturdays. And, we're going to be going over some things that maybe some of you New Japan fans already know, but we're also want to talk to not just the NJPW world watchers, but everyone that might be interested in this product. They have that show on Saturdays. They have a roster of guys. They have a champion, and we'll get into that in just a moment because they just recently had a switch after a long-term title holder. But I got to say that all of those guys, those New Japan Strong guys, kind of felt a little bit like the prelim guys on this show, and it's kind of the way that it was presented there. It seemed like the early matches, most of that were the NJPW Strong folks, and they were just kind of there at the beginning of the show. A lot of multi-man matches, a lot of matches where you do one or two spots, tag out, and next guy gets to shine a little bit. Not a lot of opportunities for any one person to get over in matches like that. Jeremy, when it comes to this, a show where it's in the United States, it has the New Japan NJPW Strong announcers, a lot of those guys on the card. How do you feel as somebody who watches Strong pretty religiously, I think, in your case, I believe, when they're kind of those guys now, it's almost like, well, the real New Japan stars are here and those guys are kind of back in prelim status. Is that how it felt to you, or am I overreacting?
You're not wrong. I would use the phrase a super indie, if that would make any sense.
Okay.
It's above an independent promotion, but it doesn't feel as big time as the standard New Japan. There's that gray middle ground right in the middle that you can't quite define what it is. You can't quite quantify, well, is it as important as this? Is it less important than that? It's its own little world, and it has that like conveyor belt where occasionally a guy stepping off from the New Japan stage proper will come over and realign the relationship to make you know that, oh, hey, this is part of what's going on here. One of the biggest tells is how Jay White is portrayed on that show, as opposed to everybody else. The company in Japan has gone to great lengths over the last 2 years to make sure that above anything else in the domestic states, no matter what happened with Tom Lawler or anybody else on Strong, that was going to be a platform for Jay White, and he was always going to look as refreshed and as strong as he could possibly be. And, laying the groundwork for now, it feels like it really paid off going into this next few years with a resurgent roster that we are going to be paying off instead of rebuilding some of these guys, where they had the Jay Whites and the Tom Lawlers. They have an opportunity to continue their momentum as opposed to having to had taken a step back. So I like the existence of it, but it's really hard to define how it's important other than just calling it, like I say, a super indie.
Yeah, it's difficult to figure out where exactly it kind of lands in the New Japan canon, and it's something that we'll be keeping our eyes on. Now, the opening match on this show, I want to talk about it briefly, is a guy who started off as a young lion. He was in the New Japan dojo system in the United States. That's now run by Katsuyori Shibata. Katsuyori Shibata, a wonderful worker who almost died after a match with Kazuchika Okada. He made a very, very foolish decision to headbutt the living hell out of Kazuchika Okada and actually had a subdermal hematoma, nearly died in the locker room and spent months recovering. He has done a little bit of in-ring work since then. Don't know if we're going to see that again for a while after the way that went, where he kind of overextended himself, at least what he told the company he was going to do in the ring. He's always been a bit of the New Japan problem child in many ways.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is, and it's amazing the man's alive. It's amazing the man is still, but he seems to be a very good trainer. Hopefully, they're not picking up the bad habits from Shibata. Maybe not the unprotected shots to the head. Maybe, but anyway. The first match was between two people that have worked with him a lot, Ren Narita and Carl Fredericks. Now, Carl Fredericks is out of his young lion stage. He's got a costume now. He's got a bit of a presentation to him. He's not the most charismatic human being that's ever lived, but he's a capable worker, and he was wrestling a guy named Ren Narita, who New Japan fans are certainly going to be familiar with. This is a guy I think is going to be an enormous star in wrestling once his excursion is over and he comes back home to New Japan. Carl Fredericks, I'm a little on the fence with, but this was a hell of a good match. Jeremy, where do you see Carl Fredericks as far as, because this time as the pandemic ends, some of these guys that went away on excursion years ago are about due to come back and start their careers. Where do you think he is? And Narita's probably got about a year or so to go. Fredericks is a little closer to the point where he might be appearing on more main roster NJPW shows. Where do you think he is?
There's something about Carl Fredericks, and I haven't been able to put my finger on it, but there's something missing. Like just that unquantifiable X factor where he's able to connect with the audience the way that other professional wrestlers who have his experience or greater are able to tap into. He's got charisma. I was really impressed with that match, by the way. He impressed me. He felt like of the Clark Connors and himself and the other guy. He just came out as the Cyborg the other day. The Kratos feuder. Coughlin? No. Yeah.
Alex
Coughlin. Between the three of them, I would have pegged him first as the guy, the leader of the pack. But now I'm not so sure about which guy really has the most momentum of the three. And I didn't think I would be saying that at this point. So does he have it? Yeah. Can he put it together? I don't know. Will he? Probably. But how big of a star will he be? Will he be thriving on the main New Japan scene within the next 18 months? I wouldn't bet against it, but it's not a sure thing.
It feels like the company now believes that Connors is probably a little bit ahead of the others just because they brought him over for the Best of the Super Juniors. And that feels a little bit more like they're taking him seriously at this stage in his career. I'm not saying they don't take the other two seriously, but I think they feel like they still have a little bit more time in the oven to go before they're really ready for the main course. And it feels like they think Connors is a little ahead of them. All three have talent in their own way. I agree with you that I feel like Fredericks is missing a little bit of something, but he might find it, and he certainly has been improving since he's been working over there. So, and Ren Narita, I'm convinced. I'm sold. I think the guy's going to be a big star in the business.
Yeah, I think what I'm looking for from Fredricks is something close to when Connors was in Seattle and he came out with his beer and he challenged Lawler to the match. And he had that swagger where the audience knew exactly the kind of guy he was. And they were like, we are all about this. Even though it was his hometown, yes, that always plays a part. But Fredricks is from LA. Every day is his hometown.
Yeah, exactly.
So we got to keep that all in mind. But is he on his way? 100%.
All right. Well, we also saw Chase Owens defeat the Great O'Con in a really good heel finish. I like that. Chase is a throwback heel. He is not cut. He's not ripped. He just wrestles really well, and he's a little smarmy little jerk that just comes up with ways to get his victories. And Great O'Con, of course, who is starting to really kind of gain momentum with me. I wasn't sure this character was going to work for him, but he's really made it improvements on it over the past year or so. And being with the United Empire is a good move for him. That's Will Ospreay's group with Jeff Cobb and TJP and Aaron Henare and Francesco Akira. One of the more interesting names in wrestling these days. And O'Con lost this one. Chase Owens put his feet up on the ropes and got the win. Of course, Chase Owens and Bad Luck Fale are the NJPW Tag Team Champions, the IWGP Tag Team Champions, which is a series of letters I just tried to say all at once and failed miserably. So is the New Japan's IWGP Tag Team Champions. So Chase Owens and Fale looks like they're building toward a United Empire Bullet Club tag team title match, and this was all part of it. Chase is just a classic heel. I thought this match was pretty fun. And O'Con, who recently saved a woman from being kidnapped, I believe, in Japan.
Child.
A child.
It was a child. 9-year-old.
It's going to be hard to make him a heel there, Jeremy, going forward in Tokyo, because this was a big news story. I mean, everyone kind of knows about this. Yeah. And so now it's difficult for him to be a big jerk in Japan. So maybe a bit of a babyface turn going for Great Okan, just whether Gato wanted to or not.
I do applaud that he attempted to bring the decree celebrating him out to the ring to actually like get people to be like, okay, that's a bit much, but it didn't work. Like they're like, you're right, you are a hero. And even the couple of matches that he came stateside, I think Windy City Riot in Chicago, just a huge ovation. They were they were over the moon for the guy. He and Owens had probably the best match I've ever seen either of them have with another person. And that's saying a lot because I've seen a lot of Chase Owens match. Haven't seen as many Ocon matches, but the fact that I'm complimenting Ocon when he premiered maybe a year and a half ago, and it was around the time Ocon, Master Watto, a bunch of these other gimmicks were coming out, and we're just like, what is going on with these gimmicks? What is happening here? And they've managed to turn it into something that isn't embarrassing. And that actually, those are two gimmicks that could be incredibly embarrassing, but I'm not embarrassed by watching it. So that's something.
That is indeed something. So let's see. We also had Brody King got a big win, defeated Minoru Suzuki at Capital Collision. This surprised me a little bit. I didn't think he was going to totally go over there, but I think Brody King is being set up to be in G1. I think he's one of the guys they might bring over there. He's got that size and look that they like to put him in with their roster, a guy that they like to it makes for interesting matchups, makes for interesting visuals. This win in a singles match over Suzuki is kind of a sign that they think pretty highly of him. I think they have plans for Brody King.
Do you think that he would take the role of, say, like Bad Luck Fale in the G1?
That's very possible because, like Fale's got the tag team title. So this could be a guy, but Fale was always treated very well in the G1, right. Was a regular double-digit scorer out there. Of course, again, just to review for those, it's 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 0 for a loss. And he would usually pick up in his 20 points, 18 points, right. 9 matches is really the maximum. And Fale usually got 10 or 12. He didn't win. He didn't win his block. He didn't win the tournament, but he was always a factor. And it might be the perfect spot for Brody King, actually, to kind of freshen things up there with that mix.
Yeah, you asked me that. Him as a name did not occur to me at all, because to me, there's about 3 people in AEW that I feel like if they're not in it and somebody like Brody King were in it instead, that there'd be a lot of pushback and there'd be a narrative around that we wouldn't be able to get past. Now, if they're going to bring in 7 or 8 people that aren't traditional New Japan guys that have never been in it or been in it once or twice, that is a real opportunity to freshen up, and Brody King is exactly the kind of guy to do that. I don't know if this is where we should orbit around that conversation, because we could go down a deep rabbit hole, but I would definitely say that of a short list of people, if Brody King were announced for the G1, I would be tremendously excited to see what he could do.
And this match was pretty good. I mean, they had decent chemistry. Of course, Suzuki's a master, right? I mean, he can just do a lot of things with a lot of different people. And we've seen that over decades with him. But this match with Brody King was pretty good. It was one of the better matches of the night. And it was a strong win for Brody. And to me, again, we're talking about a company where wins and losses do indeed matter. There are companies that say it matters, like AEW, where it doesn't. Companies where WWE, where they don't even pretend. Right. But New Japan, it does. The Ghetto's booking, you see somebody getting a singles win. You see somebody pin a champion in a tag team match. It usually means something. And I feel like this is a little bit of a signal that the New Japan brass feel that Brody King is somebody that we'll be seeing more of on the Japanese side of things, not just an AEW or an NJPW Strong. So that was just my feeling on it. We'll see if it turns out that way.
To your knowledge, is this the biggest win of Brody King's career?
Certainly in Japan. I outside of that, I think Brody King's probably had big wins and some important indies, because I mean the guy's career is strong, even though he hasn't been. He's only recently in AEW, hasn't really been with WWE in a prominent way, and this is. I'm sure he's had some wins on the indie circuit that would be strong, but if this one leads to an honest to goodness New Japan run, and again, I'm just supposing all that. I don't know.
Right.
But if this leads to a New Japan run, then yeah, I would think it would have to be, right. I mean, it would put him in a real prominent space. He hasn't had a big singles win in AEW yet. That could come. That might happen, and that might supersede it. But so far, yeah, it kind of looks like it is.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that we are in a position where younger talent is going over established talent, because it's the circle of life in pro wrestling. And Brody King is part of this wave of the future of strong talent. We don't have a whole lot of big guys left in a lot of the areas of the world that can pro wrestle the way that he can. So I just want to keep him fresh, keep him healthy, and keep him strong.
Moving on from that one, we have another great matchup here, and we're going to try to get through this collision stuff. We got a lot to talk about.
Yes,
but Tomohiro Ishii and Eddie Kingston, terrific match there. That was hard. We don't have to spend a lot of time with this because it's kind of exactly what you think you would get from these two, which is just they're going to just slug the hell out of each other. Eddie Kingston grew up watching the King's Road, All Japan style, and Ishii is the closest thing to that in New Japan in a lot of ways. And these two meshed well together. Ishii is another guy like Suzuki who can get a lot of interesting matches out of a lot of different interesting people. I enjoyed this one. And this wasn't a show that I thought was all that great top to bottom, but this match I enjoyed the heck out of.
I'm starting to believe that Eddie Kingston can lose every match that he's in and it won't make a difference.
He has that kind of charisma, doesn't he?
The lovable loser. Like, he's like the Thing from Fantastic Four. He just wants to go take a beating and do the right thing, I guess.
So then, again, to keep things moving, we had Jay White and Hikuleo. Now, this is kind of an interesting little twist here because, of course, Hikuleo's relatives, the Gorillas of Destiny, have been kicked out, banished from Bullet Club by Jay White. Yet Hikuleo and Jay White got along and worked well in a match against Kazuchika Okada and Rocky Romero. Of course, the anyone that knows New Japan booking could see the finish coming here. Jay White pinned Rocky Romero. And still, they teased a little bit more dissension, but not a total break with Hikuleo from the Gorillas of Destiny. Tangaloa came in to stop a aftermatch beatdown, and Hikuleo did not totally turn his back on the Gorillas of Destiny there, seemed to be a little bit conflicted, so they're teasing that. So one of two things is going to happen here. Either he's going to go off with his family, or he's going to do the thing where, my God, even he turned her back on him. It's gonna be one extreme or the other. Probably something happening not too far down the road, perhaps Dominion, perhaps in that range there, where they'll all be in the same place at the same time.
They set up Tangaloa and Hikuleo later on in the show, one of the shows, and they also had the Jay White and Hikuleo match the night before, I believe, at the Mutiny taping that aired on New Japan Strong as a pre-show for this, that aired at the old time slot on Friday night, as opposed to the New Japan Strong shows that air on Saturday night, but they preempted it for this live show. In that match, Jay White and Hikuleo had their battle. Jay White gave him the sling blade and then sat down in the steel chair in the middle of the ring, dressed down Hikuleo, let him know that he was, in fact, the best wrestler in the world, did the whole spiel, and Hikuleo gave him the too sweet, and they were on board. I do have to say the setup that they're doing and trying to unite all these things with Jay White is it's pretty clever storytelling, because they're using disparate parts in all different promotions around the world to tell this story.
Yeah, it's been very intriguing, and we're going to talk a lot about Bullet Club here in the coming months. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. So then the main event, we had Juice Robinson capturing the U.S. title once again in a really exciting, fast-paced four-way match with Will Ospreay, Jon Moxley, and Hiroshi Tanahashi. I really enjoyed the match. It almost made the show worth the $20 and change there itself. I thought this was really good. It was exactly the finish they needed to do if they're going to get Juice over as a heel. He needs that. He needs to win. If they had turned him immediately and then had him lose, it would have cut him off with the legs. Gato knows not to do that. And they did it in a way that nobody really got hurt by it. I was happy with this. Thought it was a good match. And Juice, with a heel edge to him, is just the kind of freshening up the man needed.
Mm-hmm. I was watching when he came out the other night with the Hiroshi Tanahashi match in Japan, and he came out and he showed up afterwards. They're like, oh, hey, that's a great idea. And then he got added to the 4-way. And in my mind, I just kind of thought, it seems like Will is the guy to win this match. This was already like the plan of the way that they were going to go about doing things. And then when Juice won, I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, let's do that. I am very excited because he seems excited that he is doing something different than the one of 5 people doing a Macho Man pastiche wherever he's going. This is good. I want to see him wrestle in a way that's not performative and pompadourish.
He does seem like he's really into this, and he even worked everybody before, where he kind of gave a couple of interviews where he said, I don't really want to wrestle anybody anymore. I kind of want to quit. And he sounded kind of dejected and like he had lost interest in wrestling and things. And then he comes back full of fire here, heel fire. And I like this. And he could have a match with Ospreay, with Moxley, with Tanahashi, any of the people in this match and several others, and it would make sense. And it would be a solid match. And having him on the heel side freshens the whole thing up, even if we've seen that individual one-on-one matchup before. So good work on their part.
I definitely think that we're going to be set up for a Finlay Juice match, maybe even at Dominion.
It would be interesting to see how Finlay would do with that one if Finlay is coming back with them like that. So So with that, that's Capital Collision. There's going to be more shows in the United States to cover coming up, and it was an enjoyable enough night. I don't know if it was totally worth $20 and change. There were a few moments on that show where it kind of felt like I was watching just a standard New Japan show that I felt like I paid for with NJPW World. But I mean, overall, not a bad night of wrestling, and it did provide a couple of moments.
I would call it a B show setting up A shows, and which is exactly what it was. It was just, you're getting Dominion, you're getting Forbidden Door, and this is all kind of laying the groundwork for what's down the line. And for that, I'm glad I got to watch it and be a part of the journey, as always.
So with that, we move on now to the Best of the Super Juniors, the tournament that has begun Sunday in Nagoya. And of course, this is the standard tournament format for New Japan Pro Wrestling, 2 blocks of 10 wrestlers, round robin style. The 2 highest point getters in each block will face off in the finals. That'll be at Budokan Hall in early June. And we have a interesting crew here. We've got people from, I believe, 5 different promotions, if you want to count Ring of Honor and AEW as 2 different ones. Even if you don't, still 4 different promotions represented in here. We got GLEAT, we've got, which is an awkward name, nevertheless, a promotion with some talent. GLEAT, that's one they did not run through the Google Translate. They weren't worried about it, what that meant in English, or what it sounded like in English. It's strange. But, we had AEW, Ring of Honor, CMLL, New Japan, a lot of
Impact
fun talent here. Impact too, yes, of course. Ace Austin, yeah, absolutely, another one.
We do have 5.
We do have 5, and we have 5 if whether it is or not. Yeah. So first night, of course, they begin with the tags, and I won't go run through all those because the tag matches are basically ways for them to get guys a little bit of work, and they kind of follow the same pattern, which is somebody that's not in the Super Juniors tournament takes the loss. Usually a Super Juniors guy gets the win. Sometimes one of the big Shingo Takagi got a victory in this one. So, and those are just kind of keep busy, kind of warm up the crowd. When you look at the first day, Jeremy, there were some interesting matches there. Ace Austin and Clark Connors had a good match. Ace Austin got the win. They put over a lot of the new faces on day 1. Alex Zane, he defeated Kanemaru. And we're going to talk about that. I think Alex Zane still is trying to get his sea legs in Japan a little bit. Francesco Akira defeated Sho. That was an upset. I did not think that match was going to end like that with 2 points for Akira. I'm not complaining about it, but it was a bit of a surprise. Hiromu Takahashi, and he did win his, but he was with another New Japan guy. But it was a good night for the newbies, Jeremy. That seemed to be the theme of the opening night. It was the new faces are threats.
Ace Austin, Akira, and who was the last? Alex Zane.
Alex Zane.
They each had the best match I've ever seen them have. And
Really?
I believe that I haven't watched a whole lot of Ace Austin, but it appeared that he was wrestling the best match he could ever wrestle, given that it was his first opportunity on the stage. I'd never seen Francisco Akira before in my life. Hadn't really heard much about him,
Yeah, I
and
neither.
he was a revelation.
He's terrific.
I just watched him like, you look like the kid brother in Archie with a little bit of acne. What's going on here? And then he just came out there and he stole the show for me. Alex Zane, he looked huge. How is he weigh enough? Or
Yeah.
how is he even Kanemaru looking up like, what is this? What is going on here?
Allegedly, it is a shoot 100 kilogram limit, but Alex Zane is stretching credulity there. I will admit that. He did look pretty thick for a junior anyway. Certainly standing next to Kanemaru, who's not a big junior, let alone a big guy.
No,
Period.
he's not.
But Zane looked big.
He also looked about 10 years older than he did a year ago. And
Yes,
I was just looking at him like, the road has owned you, buddy. I don't know what's going on there. But he had a match with Strickland about a month ago that I was not impressed by whatsoever. And it felt like whatever criticism or whatever he needed to do to get right and show his skill, I don't have opinions of him that are related to Strickland now. I have opinions based off of what he's doing in the Super Juniors, and it was great work. I was tremendously impressed with all three of the invitees for the first time this year.
Ace Austin looked real good against Connors. Connors looked good there. I was actually watching with somebody who's not a wrestling fan at all, and she kept referring to him as Tawny Katan because of the hair. She just was very, very impressed by the hair, and it is flowing. I will say that. I don't know if it's rolling around on Whitesnake's car flowing, but nevertheless, Tawny Katan was it.
It is impressive to keep that level of hair quality and that humidity inside of a stadium like that. That's good hair. That's good hair producting.
That's a stamina issue. Let's see how he does during rainy season, Jeremy. Let's see how he does during rainy season in Japan. But Alex Zane, my only thing about him was to just look. I mean, I know they were working the knee too. That was the thing in that match where Kanemaru worked Zane's knee, but he seemed a little slow sometimes in that one. Just like some of his movements, he just seemed like he was a little slow. Crowd was certainly unsure of Zane. They didn't really know what to do with the guy. Mm-hmm. And of course, we mentioned that in Japan, they're still not allowed to cheer and boo. They have to wear their masks, and they're supposed to speak with their feet in their hands through clapping and stomping. So it's not a great sample anyway. But it did feel like they weren't sure what they thought of Zane. And I wasn't sure what I was thinking of him most of that match. I thought his tag match on night 2 was a little bit better. I think he might just be getting his sea legs in Japan. Maybe he's tired. He might be jet lagged.
It could be in your head.
That was the only thing about him.
Like those are like,
it's scary. I mean, this is a big deal for him.
The whole thing, like, you're gonna get the yips. You're gonna if you haven't been to the dance before, like you don't know what it's like. And one day, like, he's going to come back, he's going to be at the dance, and he's not going to have this kind of trepidatious, cautious aspect of it. But even with all that said, I still maintain I think it was the best match I've ever seen him have.
Well, that's not bad. If he is jet lagged at all, if he is a little bit nervous and he still had the best match, then think of how good this is going to get for him. So that's
absolutely, the future is bright.
The future's bright. Hiromu Takahashi and Ryusuke Taguchi. Let's talk about this for a second, because man, Ryusuke Taguchi did something on Sunday that I did not know was possible, is that he pried a bad match out of Hiromu Takahashi. And it's not Hiromu's fault. Look, Taguchi is a comedy wrestler now, and all he wants to do is comedy. All he does is comedy. It's not particularly funny, and it's not particularly entertaining. And Hiromu did what he could, but I didn't enjoy this at all. And I love Hiromu Takahashi. I think he is one of my 5 favorite wrestlers on earth. And even he really couldn't get, and even the crowd, you could just kind of hear it go, like it was just this, we're going to do this. We're going to do butt jokes this whole time. Like,
are you going to pin me? You should just pin me. I get
it. I can't believe with all the scatological stuff this guy does that WWE hasn't signed him, because McMahon loves that stuff. But there used to be a thing with Taguchi. And this is probably before you were watching, if you tuned in 17, 18. It used to happen. Taguchi was a great worker. And I'm using the word great seriously. He was great.
I remember the stories.
he still did comedy, and he still was kind of goofy, even when he was teaming with Prince, with Finn Balor and Prince Devitt. He still did kind of goofy stuff, and he still did comedy. But there was a switch that he would flip, and the crowd understood it. So they were like, "Hi," people would be laughing along and things, and then all of a sudden his work style would kind of change, and then the crowd would go with it, thinking, "Oh, okay, now we're doing the serious Taguchi stuff. Now it's a serious Taguchi match." Like he would turn it off and say, "Okay, we're going to wrestle now," and that guy could work. Looks like he doesn't really want to anymore. And it's unfortunate because he is capable of it, but just doesn't really want to. He's becoming the Toru Yano of the junior division, and I don't mean that as a compliment. It's his matches are now, you have to kind of get through them more than enjoy them. It wasn't always the case. And getting a bad match out of Hiromu Takahashi's a rare feat, because not even Toru Yano did that. They actually did have a decent match as part of the New Japan Cup a while ago. I don't know, Jeremy, am I just being too rough on him?
I don't think you're being too rough, but I think if I were to dip my finger in a pond and see the ripple effects of how this all plays out, I think this is kind of setting up, and this is way early on this, but I think this is setting up like Hiromu losing near the end because his journey, like the audience is not going to get behind him if his journey seems a little bit easier than, say, some of these other challengers who've never won before, and they're overcoming these gray dogs. When Hiromu comes out of the tournament and he is the previous winner a number of times, and he has an immediate like joke match coming out of the gate, it gives you the sense that you are not to be as invested in his journey to the championship as perhaps all these others. And I think of it as more of a psychological like laying of the groundwork, where you have all these, but you have the Robbie Eagles, you have a couple of these other guys that you're rooting for. You want to see them hit that next accomplishment. But if you lay it down in such a way where you're not as invested in Hiromu's journey right out the gate, it clears up that mental landscape for you to be more invested in other people that the company wants you to be invested in over the course of this marathon, like round robin.
Yeah, I think we both agree, and we're going to get to our predictions later on, because there's only one set of matches per block, so we're not coming in too late into this. And as you know, there Gedo's booking style in these is some people are going to be dug holes to climb out of. Some people are going to be front runners that may be tired toward the end. There's going to be twists and turns. So one match we can still make predictions and still be in good shape. But I think both of us feel that Hiromu is going to be a factor, but this isn't going to be his year to win.
Yeah, and gatekeeper, 100% gatekeeper.
Yeah, I think so. And the junior heavyweight champion headlined against Taiji Ishimori. Let me just say his name against Yo, and had this is a really good match. They did a really good job, and both of them are terrific wrestlers. But this was pretty much as it was going to go. I think Yo is a bit of a dark horse, and again, we'll get into our predictions. But Ishimori did win this, worked over Yo's shoulder. Ishimori is one of these guys that I feel like he kind of sits in the tag team division every once in a while, but when it's his time to be in the junior heavyweight title picture, there aren't very many better than this dude.
I definitely agree. When he beat Desperado for the title a couple weeks ago, it was one of those, like, I didn't expect him to win, but then he did going into the Super Juniors. Was like, yeah, oh, okay. And then I was just realizing, like, yeah, no, he is the guy to hold the title right now. He's exactly that kind of like dominant talent in the Super Juniors that has the credibility of holding the title, but at the same time, you believe that there are a number of contenders that on any given day might be able to beat him.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't come off as an untouchable machine. He comes off as a guy that's extraordinarily talented and a little bit dirty, because he's with that Bullet Club group. But it can be had, and is very good at just barely not being had. Yeah. And that's a great. If you can do that as a heel, there's work for you in this business.
The narrative of the Super Juniors is that this is your chance to get at a guy who can be got. Is a great idea for a tournament.
Very well put. So we moved on to night two. So that was the first block there. And then we moved on to night two. And this started off with a guy I have a soft spot for, Doki. And this is a guy that has worked in Mexico, worked in Japan for years, and he's kind of the, would you say, the Chase Owens maybe of Suzuki-gun? He's like the guy that has a good match and loses, right? I mean, that's been his story. And Doki got a win over El Lindemann in the first one. I'm happy. I like this guy. I want him to do a little bit better in the turn. He's not going to win. But I'm a fan of this guy's work, actually, and I think it has improved, and it was good to begin with, but it's improved since he came back to Japan. He actually came in to replace El Desperado, who had, I believe, fractured his jaw in a match, and they needed a late replacement. Doki came in, and he's stayed ever since because he's a good hand. Got a win over Gleitz, El Lindemann, in a pretty good match and a bit of a surprise. I think Doki's a middle of the pack finisher overall, but I'm hoping it's just a little bit further up in the middle of the pack than usual. That's just my soft spot for this tournament.
It was one of those matches that I was like, man, Super Juniors is really bringing out the best in people. They're really trying. And I was able to catch this in a couple more matches before life just, there's not enough time sometimes to get through 7 hours of New Japan in a 2-day period. But here we are. We're trying anyways. We're trying anyways. I don't have nearly the affection, and I'm going to use affection for Dookie that you do. But they're bringing their B game, if not their A game.
Oh, man. All right. Well, this will just be my guy. But
that's your stand. That's your stand. We have the entire tournament for me to come around on him.
Maybe well. Next one was El Fantasma against Bushi. These are two regulars, been around there a long time. Fantasma, I'm curious to see what they're doing with Fantasma, because they teased the idea that he was losing his heel mojo a little bit with his super kick, and he was hesitant to use it, and it was loaded. His boot was loaded, and that was exposed. And then lately he seems to be finding it again. I don't know if that's just part of the Bullet Club resurgence. They say, well, everybody at Bullet Club looks like a badass right now to reestablish the group. Could be it. Or they could be building to something down the road with Fantasma and his frequent tag team partner, Ishimori. But this was a good match. Fantasma got the win over Bushi, who's a solid hand. Not a whole lot for me to be said about this one, other than it just sets both of them off with a good match to start the tournament. Again, this is another one where I see these two guys kind of finishing in the middle of the pack, probably. But overall, it was good opener.
Fantasma is a guy that I kind of have pegged to finish near the top of the rankings on one end, kind of threatened, but not quite. Had they made more of an effort to lay down the groundwork of how he was struggling narratively after the loaded boot episodes that he had, I would have leaned towards, Fantasma changing to the side of the Angels in some way. I'm not sure that's happening now. Yeah. But I think it's one of those, keep your eye on Fantasma, because there are things happening with that guy that by the end of the year he will be a different wrestler.
Well, something to keep an eye on. And I can see what you mean, that there might be some twists and turns in this very tournament right here. So he's in a different block than Ishimori, which I thought was intriguing in a way. Mm-hmm. Robbie Eagles defeated Wheeler Yuta. Wheeler Yuta are the darling of AEW right now. Everybody loves them some Wheeler Yuta, and Robbie Eagles beat him. Which and we're going to get to our predictions, and this didn't surprise me at all. But Yuta, a big time babyface here, and has worked solid babyface. Shook Eagles' hand, gracious in defeat, and I think this is a guy that can really make some strides. He's probably going to lose most of his matches in this tournament. But just the feeling, seeing him in a couple of matches, working with the New Japan guys, I'm guessing the Gato saves his number.
I think he's a guy that you're going to save for a rainy day, if you will. There's a lot of potential with him, both in AEW and as an emissary for AEW over in New Japan. I fully expect this guy to come back to AEW after New Japan, and he's going to look like a completely different wrestler. Just the marathon, the sprint, going through something that Moxley has already been through, just kind of like that round robin style tournament where you keep gutting through the pain. That's gonna set up that kind of relationship there. I felt like when I was watching Yuta in this match, he was half between his, I want to say flippy shit, and his Blackpool character. There's kind of a middle ground there that I feel like he couldn't quite navigate which one he wanted to be. And that might be a story thing where he has to commit to one way or the other to have more success, but he can't play it down the middle, if that makes any sense.
They leaned hard into the Blackpool style at the end of the match. And I agree with you about how he kind of did a little bit of both, but the end of the match was just a series of submissions and counters and roll-ups, and his Blackpool Combat Club work and training kind of showed up there and how they worked the finish of that match. But Robbie Eagles got the win. And then we had, and I know this is past the part that you managed to see. I'm sure you'll get to it, but TJP defeated Master Wato. Again, this is another guy that's not brand new to New Japan. He's been there before, but it's been a little while, and they put him over Wato, who's pretty much settled in as a mid to prelimish type of babyface for them. And TJP helped out Akira in night one by keeping Sho from using a foreign object. He gets a win here. Still kind of has a heel attitude, but this was a good match, and he did get the win over Wato. And then it ended up with El Desperado beating Titan. I kind of thought Titan might get the upset because they like to put they like to have a big upset in the early days of the tournament. But Desperado, who has really come into his own as a fabulous singles wrestler over the last few years, and a solid junior heavyweight champion until recently, when, like you mentioned, they put it on Ishimori to get just a real solid heel with the title. But Desperado defeated Titan, a very good match. Desperado, of course, was Namahage in Mexico for his excursion, and he still brings Namahage out sometimes during Fantastica Mania when the CMLL guys all come over. He got to use his lucha roots a little bit in this one. It went very well. And after that, too, Suzuki-gun's slight babyface turn continued because he was very gracious and showed sportsmanship toward Titan after the match. Just a real good one, and 2 solid points for a contender in Desperado.
Exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing it when I get the chance.
It's a good match. They really work well together, and you can see that he has fun doing the lucha stuff every once in a while. There's always a little bit of lucha in some of the New Japan junior heavyweight style, but this was the full, runs and tumbling and things. And you could see Desperado like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is kind of fun to do again. So it was a nice match there. And Titan's a talented dude, so that's a good one. I'm glad he's there. They've had a lot of good Mexican wrestlers and CMLL workers in Super Juniors before, and even in G1 at times. But this is going to be a good showcase for Titan and get him some good experience too. So
I'm excited about the international invitational setup that they've got with this.
Yeah.
So speaking of Titan, and we have 20 guys in this thing. What are your breakout candidates that breakout candidates to really shine in this tournament? And if you got 1 or 2 guys that you think are going to win it all, who are they?
As far as the breakout things go, I think that TJP is probably going to have a pretty solid run points wise. I think Titan is going to have a good run points wise, and I feel like they're going to treat Ace Austin pretty well also. I think he's going to get some victories there. I don't think we're going to see. I think we're going to see good matches, but not a lot of wins out of Clark Connors. I feel like Alex Zane is probably going to finish middle of the pack. That's just my guess right there. And Lindemann as well. They're gonna get some wins because just for PR purposes, you're working with these other companies. You don't want to just job their guys out,
right?
Because Clark Connors is an LA Dojo guy. I don't see him winning a whole lot of matches because the wins have to come from somewhere. But those are the kinds that I think, and I think Yuta is probably going to lose most of his. But I kind of feel like Titan is going to get a decent run. I feel like TJP is going to get a decent run. Now, as far as who's going to win this thing, my pick on that, and I'm looking at the A block here, I feel like in the one pick, I feel like Ishimori might actually make the finals as champion. I don't think he's going to win the tournament, but this feels like the kind of year where they threaten the idea that the heel champion is going to win the thing and then either not defend the title or defend it against somebody he knows he could beat, something like that, and tease that. So I think Ishimori might end up winning his block. Hiromu Takahashi is always going to be a factor. The dark horse in that one is Yo, who I feel like Gato has a big push in store for at some point. He got beat down, and then kind of came back against Show and got the best of Show a couple of times. That one's been back and forth, but I feel like they have plans for Yo. In the B block, I think Desperado's going to do well. El Fantasma, I agree with you, is going to do well. And if Ishimori goes to the finals, I think they might sneak Fantasma in there just to have that little clash if they're going to go with the idea of Fantasma being ambivalent about Bullet Club. But my pick's Robbie Eagles. I think it's his year. I think it's his time. He's held the title before. They seem to like him, and he's a good, just babyface guy. He's always been portrayed as just a good dude, and that's a good contrast with the current just House of Torture jerk heel champion. That I think Robbie Eagles is going to win the tournament this year.
You know, and I'm going to agree with you. I think Robbie Eagles is the guy to win it all. Just looking at the brackets, the layout, and everything set up. I think the two breakouts in the A block that I'm keeping an eye on are Francisco Akira and Clark Connors. I think both of those guys are going to have exceptional showings that people will be talking about because they weren't ready for it. I think in that block, I think Hiromu ends up winning the block, but losing to the B block challenger, sort of as a gatekeeper passing of the torch, is like, you got through me, go get it, go get him, kid, kind of thing. Because I do think that we are rapidly approaching the time where Hiromu Takahashi will be in the heavyweight division. We already had the Evil stuff where he got the win over Evil. They're really setting up that he has potential in that division. And this might be the last time we see Hiromu Takahashi in a BOSJ.
Yeah, moment of silence.
I know. What a run. What a run.
He's been remarkable for a very long time, yeah. So with that, pardon me, go ahead.
I was going to follow up. I'm going to actually have you talk about some more of the Super Juniors. You have done some diligent research talking about a couple of things with the Super Juniors, and I'm going to give the floor to you to kind of give the history lesson, if you will.
Look, I love the history part. And again, my history site, Ringside Replay, goes into a lot of New Japan history, and it covers 1981 week by week. And that was the year that Tiger Mask, the original Tiger Mask, Satoru Sayama, debuted for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and he and Dynamite Kid changed the entire industry. And it set off this junior heavyweight revolution that has culminated in what we're watching now today with the best of the Super Juniors. But the Super Junior tournament did not begin until 1988. And this was called the Top of the Super Juniors in 1988. So we're going to go back a little bit because there's some very interesting people in that tournament. There were 12 men in the tournament. It was held from January 4th to February 7th that year. And tournament was not an annual thing. In fact, this was the last one until 1991, but this is the very first junior heavyweight tournament. The finalists were Shiro Koshinaka, who is a legend in New Japan, just recently showed up and wrestled a little bit, and Hiroshi Hase. Hiroshi Hase was a star that ended up in the heavyweight division in New Japan in the 90s and was a wonderful worker and booker of the heavyweight division in New Japan in the 90s during the Keiji Muto, Masachono type of and Shinya Hashimoto era. Don't want to leave him out. He's one of the pillars as well. Hase, famous as a booker, Jeremy, for taking himself down the cards whenever he got the book. He would put over the other stars and kind of take a bit of a back seat, which I'm sure won him a lot of respect in the locker room. But in 1988, he was a junior heavyweight and a very good one. Koshinaka defeated him in the finals there. Now, I want to talk about this. This is a 12-man tournament, and it says that no one's really sure how the points worked. Just not. It might have been a work, but to give you an idea, 12-man tournament, Koshinaka and Hiroshi Hase made the finals with a score of 41. 41 each.
Sure.
Got nothing on it. I don't know how that worked. But interesting names down below. Now, finishing third and just out of the money there, Nobuhiko Takada, who would end up being the top star of UWFI, which was a monster promotion for a while and drew stadium crowds for matches with Vader on top for the UWFI title. And that was a worked shoot company that did a pretty good job of making it look like they were doing some real stuff in there. Partially because every once in a while they just did real stuff and kicked the hell out of each other. But Nobuhiko Takada, another good junior heavyweight wrestler, also debuted in 1981. And he finished third. And finishing fourth, the great Owen Hart with 39 points there. Yeah, Owen finished there. He was actually a junior heavyweight champion in there. Would be later, actually. He was not as the tournament went on, but would become junior heavyweight champion that year, and ended up losing that one to Koshinaka later that year. So Owen Hart, finishing fourth. The other ones were Kazuo Yamazaki, and here's a name that you may have heard of. I bet you have, even if you don't realize it. Keiichi Yamada finished with 31 points, middle of the pack. You know who Keiichi Yamada is, right, Jeremy?
I do not. Tell me who he is.
Jushin Thunder Liger.
Well, there you go.
Before he had the mask. So
hey,
there you go. Kenyuki Kobayashi. Yeah. Hiro Saito at 24. Tony St. Clair, 14 points. Tatsuyoshi Goto, different one than the current Goto, obviously. Masa Funaki finished with 8 points. And poor Norio Honaga went through the tournament without scoring a point. But that was in the very first top of the Super Juniors. So you had one of the all-time stars, a Hall of Famer, in Nobuhiko Takada with UWFI. Hiroshi Hase, who, by the way, is in the Japanese Diet. He's basically a senator in Japan now and has been part of the prime minister's cabinet. So a very successful politician in Japan, Hiroshi Hase, after his years there. And, of course, Jushin Thunder Liger, one of the all-time legends. And Owen Hart, of course, also an all-time legend who was part of that tournament. And the last thing I wanted to cover is the 2002 tournament. The reason I bring that up is because it began on this date 20 years ago. So on May 17th, 2002, the 9th Super Juniors tournament began, and this had also some interesting names in it. Masayuki Naruse, Watanaro Inoue. So there's some names there that you probably haven't heard of, but you had Liger, El Samurai. You had Gedo. Gedo was in the tournament as a wrestler. Kakihara, Koji Kanemoto, who's a fantastic junior heavyweight for New Japan. Akira and Minoru Tanaka. Now this one had a strong Curry Man also. Jado was in it. And so back in their younger days, the elder statesmen of New Japan were part of this tournament in a big way. The tournament came down to Koji Kanemoto. He won it over Minoru Tanaka. And kind of follows something we've seen, Jeremy. Both of the men lost on night one. Both of the finalists lost on night one. So long-standing tradition of opening night upsets, not taking the big contenders out. There are always comebacks to be had in Best of the Super Juniors. So, again, 20 years ago today, the Super Juniors started, and Koji Kanemoto would go on to win it over Minoru Tanaka and become a junior heavyweight legend with New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Create the tension, create the chase, a formula that lasts timeless.
Yeah, and Gedo is a master of it. So those are a couple of little history things right there. So the very first tournament, and then the one that began 20 years ago today. And as we go on through here, we'll be taking a look at these dates in history and seeing where New Japan was at various points in that part of the calendar year. Of course, there's always a lot of history going on with that company as far as foreign stars coming over and working from the United States and all-time Japanese legends clashing. So we'll have a lot to talk about with that.
Thanks for doing that, Steven. I learned a couple of things from there. Let's jump back to the future. Let's talk about Bullet Club. Probably the most interesting faction in New Japan right now. Its tentacles are reaching to several different promotions. There is an argument that maybe Bullet Club is outplayed a little bit, and you could move on from something like that. How do you feel about Bullet Club in 2022? Do you think that it is being positioned as a top promotion worldwide, a top faction worldwide in this promotion? Or do you think that we are refreshing something that has outlived its shelf life?
I feel like right now, Gedo has done a very good job of putting a little bit of life into something that I may have made the argument 6 months ago was time to split up and let it come to a conclusion. I've changed my mind now. It's over with me again, and they're over with me again as heels. But for a while, Bullet Club was just kind of goofy, and it had fallen onto the hard times. Part of it is that a lot of the foreigners couldn't come out. Bad Luck Fale has been working on his dojo in New Zealand. Some of the guys, such as Jay White, weren't coming over to Japan. You had the Gorillas of Destiny breakup happen, but for a while, Evil was the top single star that was actually in Japan and working the shows. His House of Torture gimmick was sometimes they would work, sometimes they would kind of trip over their own shoelaces and lose, and sometimes they would be outsmarted and they would kind of look bumbling for a while. And I just thought maybe it's time. And I thought when they started doing the House of Torture thing, when they came out with their own T-shirts and things, maybe this is the split. Like maybe they're just going to go, people are going to go their separate ways, and it's not going to be Bullet Club so much. It's going to be House of Torture. But obviously, one of the stories that Gato really likes to tell is to beat somebody down and beat somebody down, and then have them rise from the ashes. He was excellent at doing this with baby faces. He did it with Yo, where he made it look, where Yo just looked like a putz, and Sho had turned on him. He couldn't win a match, and then he went on a run. He's done it a couple of times where he's resurrected Hiroshi Tanahashi, where at one point Kota Ibushi was standing with his hands on his hips, looking on at him in disgust as he crawled around the Korakuen floor. Then he ends up winning the G1, beating Kenny Omega, coming for the title, making his runs with the U.S. title. He loves a redemption story. What he hadn't done is rebuild a heel group, and he's done it. And with just a few shows, the turn on, which I believe came in Impact, actually, wasn't that where they kicked out Gorillas of Destiny?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and then they brought it into some of these guys into the Strong, and then now they're popping up on AEW. All of a sudden, this resurgence, Juice Robinson turning on Tanahashi. They've captured the IWGP tag team titles. They've captured the junior heavyweight title. They've captured the U.S. title. They had the 6-man belts. And Jay White looks very credible as a challenger to Kazuchika Okada. And we know that Jay, when he is in these big matches, is among the best performers in the world, I think. When he's in it big, in a big show, in the main event, the man knows how to deliver. And right now it kind of feels all fresh and new again. And you hate the guys. Like they really have, they're really the only pure heel faction in New Japan right now. And instead of being kind of bumbling, goofy, oh, let's wait for the ref bump and look at all the interference and all that, I'm kind of into it now. These guys are assholes and they're kind of winning. And so now we're waiting to see who rallies the troops and takes them back down a peg. I think that's going to be a while before that happens, because I think they're going to stay strong for a minute. But it's breathed new life into them. They are on multiple different shows, multiple different promotions, doing interesting things. It just all feels fresh and good again. And there aren't a lot of pure heels left in wrestling, Bullet Club kind of stand out.
Do you think you'll see anybody wearing a Bullet Club shirt in AEW?
Boy, I feel like it's kind of coming, don't you think? I mean, especially with the Forbidden Door thing and this, I think that there may be a portion of it, but who knows? Seems like everybody's in a faction in AEW anyway, so somebody needs to be.
We're starting to get some type of Bullet Club action in WWE, so you can never rule anything out.
That's true. They did it, didn't they? Balor and AJ, wasn't it?
And Liv Morgan.
And Liv?
And Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan is part of their group.
Liv
so we'll get sorry for that. I will tell you that I felt like Bullet Club was disjointed, and I was waiting for the official split with the House of Torture, because they did this offshoot faction, and I've been waiting for some type of evil Jay White issue where they're like, okay, you're done, I'm done, we're done with each other. And they haven't really done that. They've actually ignored the whole thing. And that's the one part of Bullet Club that doesn't quite sit right with me, and I'm just waiting for them to address it. The other thing about it is they've really done a great job with refreshing, getting rid of Tama Tonga and Tangaloa out of the group. As long as they've been in it, I want to be careful with how I say this. I feel like their presence in the group brings the group down perception-wise. They are not untalented wrestlers. They are not they're not bad at what they do, but their presence has created a staleness within the company because you knew exactly what level that they were as a fan. So when you're watching it and you have these guys that are kind of at a certain tier, if you will, you know that if they win a title, it's not going to be as important as, say, like the guy who beats the title from them. So when you start to recycle it and renew the faction and bring in the new people and make it so that Bullet Club itself is reinvigorated as the top heel group, it makes the entire promotion reinvigorated.
And I think God needed the refresh just as much as Juice Robinson did.
Yes.
Like you said, they had kind of been doing the same act in the same spot in the same part of the card for a long time. That's very well put. And this does give them a little fresh look to them. They've got a reason now to hate these Bullet Club guys for kicking them out. I mean, Tama Tonga was one of the founding members, so it means something that he got kicked. And and Tonga Loa, like you said, not an untalented guy, and but it's fresh for them. They have fresh partners. They have fresh enemies. And it was what was needed for those guys because they had kind of done everything you could possibly do with Bullet Club. So good move overall for there. And we'll see which way Hikuleo lands. It seems odd he wouldn't be with his family, but who knows what happens there.
Gotta fly on your own sometimes. One last question to you about the Bullet Club.
Okay.
Would you ever change the name of the Bullet Club?
I feel like it's got enough cachet now. It's a little bit like saying, like, well, should they not be the Horsemen anymore? Even though the members change and stuff. I kind of feel like it has, well, man, how long? I mean, it's over 10 years now of history in wrestling. There's a long time for a faction to evolve. So I wouldn't change the name. I still think it has a little bit of that, a little bit of swagger to it, especially with Jay White and these big time heels running it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I agree with you, but at the same time, because of the name, I would never wear merchandise.
Okay. Well,
so like, it's one of those, like, it has the cachet, and there are people that wear the merchandise, but I know personally I wouldn't wear something that says Bullet because I don't want people to associate me with guns in some way. Like, it's a very weird, like, mental thing, but it's really the one reason why I will never wear Bullet Club gear.
It was selling at Hot Topic, wasn't it? Wasn't that some
Absolutely.
of the things? Like, yeah, it was doing well there with the Skater Boys for loving it.
I look past it, I'm like, yeah, I could do without machine guns on my shirt. I'm good. All right.
Yeah, so Carl Anderson got to use his machine gun sound effect again. He was so excited to do it.
Good for him. I'm really happy for him. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up pretty soon, but before we do, we're just gonna talk a couple of guesses what we think Dominion and Forbidden Door have ahead of us. Steven, I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts, what you would like to see and what you think is coming based off of what you know so far in Dominion, and then follow it up with Forbidden Door.
Dominion, the main thing that I'm hoping for is that we get that long, great New Japan main event between Jay White and Okada. It's been a long time. They hadn't faced each other in a singles match since the Madison Square Garden show. It's time for this again. I'm ready for it again. I'm very curious to see who goes over because Okada is the New Japan safety blanket. It is a guy that they go to when they aren't feeling totally confident because they know Okada can deliver. They know the people think of him as a star, and he can be the guy that if you put the title on him, it just makes sense. He is a champion type of guy. When they take it off of him is when they're feeling a little froggy. And let's see how confident they are about the future that maybe put it on Jay White and continue this Bullet Club push, or if Okada's going to come through again and they stay with their safety blanket. That's what I'm curious about. Other than that, I think that Bullet Club will probably take a loss or two, but I don't think it's going to be in the main matches. Otherwise, I think they're going to keep that faction very strong, especially going into G1. I think they're going to really threaten a Bullet Club invasion of G1. So I'm looking for this Bullet Club push to continue strong to the point that I think Ishimori is probably going to beat whoever wins this tournament. And if it is Robbie, it's going to be a good match. But I think Ishimori is going to win. I see Chase and Fale being the 6-man tag team titles are the most vulnerable. So you can switch those, and who cares? Yeah. But I think we're going to see a strong Bullet Club. That's my guess for Dominion. What do you think is going to happen?
I kind of had a thought that Okada is going to stay champion through at least the G1. I think with it being the 50th year anniversary, having him as the face of the company, just the marquee, everything about it is just like you got big main event Okada all year round.
Yeah.
That to me seems like the safest bet, like you were saying. But I'm never going to rule out the idea of Jay White. I have so much respect for that guy in the way that he has performed over the years. Big match, small match. I was at that Madison Square Garden show where he fought. I was there, and I was just like, this should have been the main event. It should have been the main event.
Right.
But I've been to Jay White match there. I was at Long Beach against Hangman Adam Page, and I actually think that may be a direction we're heading to very, very soon. If I had to guess, the only other thing that I would think is that there is a theory that I've had that because there might be some talent coming from AEW, that something like the Never Trios openweight titles may end up in AEW for a run. It's kind of we don't have room on the shows right now for the trios, and these guys aren't in the G1. Come on over, and everyone can have trios matches over in Dynamite while they're doing kind of a talent share. That was kind of the guess that, with the trios titles and AEW kind of, getting whispered about it. I have nothing to base that on, but it seemed like one of those ideas that like, hey, why not? They're doing 6-man matches all the time over there anyways. And then for Forbidden Door, my the 3 main matches that I've lined up in my head are Okada and Punk, Jay White and Adam Page, where Adam Page would already be still be the champion. And then, which would call back to that Long Beach show where Hangman lost to Jay White, and Jay White comes calling saying, hey, you already lost to me once. What makes you think that, you got a chance this time? And, Hangman's turn this time around. There's a circleness to that I feel is pretty much the direction they'd like to go for the first time around. And then Tanahashi and Moxley will finally, hopefully happen in Chicago.
I would love that. For Forbidden Door, there are a couple of things that came to my mind right away. There are 2 guys, and CM Punk's one of them, that we haven't seen because of circumstances, WWE careers and various other things. I've made it an hour and 12 minutes without coughing. I'm about to.
Do it. Just get.
Pardon me. So close to the finish line. So the other one is Daniel Bryan, who would be a perfect person to go in with those classic New Japan guys. And, now we know our time limit, don't we? About an hour. Right. Now we know. There we go, folks.
You're doing great. Take it home.
We're all learning together here. We're all learning together. But Daniel Bryan against any of the classic, when I say classic New Japan guys, Naito, Okada, Tanahashi, even Suzuki, but those guys that have those long New Japan main events that when I would watch Daniel Bryan jobbing to somebody ridiculous on WWE back in the day, I want to see Bryan Danielson go in as Bryan Danielson and wrestle those guys.
Yes.
And do it his way and do it the way that we know he's capable of doing it. And I think he's itching to. I mean, I really feel like he is. G1 is ambitious.
One of those.
Just the G1 is ambitious. It's a hard tournament. Even John Moxley wasn't sure he wanted to do it. It's scary, for guys, And I've heard that it's one of the first things they ask people about that have done it when they get into a new locker room. It's like, what's a G1 like? You've done a G1. But I mean, I'd love to see it. Don't get me wrong, but I doubt that we will. But Danielson against those guys, one of those guys, I'm just asking for, seriously, any of them, I think he would have the time of his life. And I think he would put in, he always puts in a great performance, but I think this would be the A+++, to take off Paul and Stephanie's thing about a B+ player thing. It would be the A+++ Bryan Danielson if he got a chance to have one of those matches. And so those are the kinds that I'm hoping for, because we haven't seen any of those matchups, not just in a long time, but Punk and Bryan Danielson. just because of the politics of the business. We haven't been able to see any of that yet, and there's so much good stuff just sitting there for guys who don't have 5 years necessarily. We need to get this stuff done.
Yes. The window is closing to get some of these dream matches that we've all thought about while these guys are still happy, healthy, and able to go in the ring the way that they can. Steven, we've gone on an hour and 15 minutes, man. We covered all the things that we wanted to cover. Why don't you give us your socials before we wrap it up?
I am at SM Conway 88 on Twitter. And again, my website, Ringside Replay. And then I'm also a regular contributor to Fight Game Media, where I write about WWE. I put out a guide to each premium live event. They're not pay-per-views anymore, Jeremy. I got to get my nomenclature correct again. The premium live events, I do one of those, and I write features about WWE and New Japan now for Fight Game Media. You can find me there. How about you?
You can find me at Jer Finestone on Twitter. You can find me here every 2 weeks with Stephen Conway as we begin our journey, speaking of strong style, through the adventures of New Japan. And don't forget to check out the Patreon at Fight Game Media, $5 a month, where you get all these shows and interactions and all the things that you could want from smart pro wrestling commentators. We're going to see you next time. Thanks for watching.